Good morning, everyone, to the Wilmington Chamber of Commerce this morning. We're excited to have you here for the Cape Fear Talent Survey Reveal. It's going to be an exciting morning. We're going to learn a lot. Welcome those of you who are attending the webinar. I know that we have some elected officials from around the region. We also have our partners who've been with us along the way in the surveys out there, encouraging employees to fill it out. We thank you so much at the Chamber. Without the investment of the businesses in our community. And so to that end, I'd like to very sincerely thank our sponsor for today. Bo Birch is the CEO of Human Capital Solutions. He founded and launched Human Capital Solutions, Inc. in assessment and organizational transformation roles with diverse international corporations in the industrial, consumer, technology, and manufacturing sectors. We are so fortunate to have Bo here in the Wilmington area. He has connections all over the country and does work for companies all over the country. So he knows talent, and he's going to be a great partner with us in what comes out of the results that we hear from in this survey. Bo's been a longtime supporter of nonprofit organizations in our community, and we're really grateful to have your investment, Bo, in this event today. Love for you to say a few words to our audience.
Thank you, Natalie. It is an honor to be with you today. It's an honor to live in this great community. And I've got about 20 years under my belt as a resident in Wilmington. Look back at my career, and it was usually 4 or 5, and I was moving and would like to try to contribute and listen today and learn, providing an angle that maybe the audience could use today. So thank you for having me here.
Thank you. And again, thank you for the investment that Human Capital Solutions has made in the event and in the survey. We look forward to working with the team at Human Capital Solutions throughout this. So we've been talking about talent. Actually, I could say I've been talking about talent my whole career. It has consistently been the issue that employers raise as one that needs to be addressed. And so, I've heard members say over the years when I was at the Charlotte Chamber and here, oh yeah, we've had this conversation before. And so there are skeptics out there who think we're just having yet another survey and yet another conversation. But I'd like to take you back to February, when the Chamber hosted our annual meeting, and in front of 300 people live and everybody who's watched our videos since then, we made a claim, we staked a claim in this community that we were going to launch a program called Talent Pipeline Management. It's about working with employers to identify those talent needs and then partner with educational institutions, workforce development institutions, and others to ensure we develop the talent that our industries are looking for. It's a partnership across all avenues. And thankfully, over a year ago, Cape Fear Collective and the Chamber got together and partnered. We sent Megan Lewis to talent pipeline management training with the U.S. Chamber and the North Carolina Chamber. Megan had brought the idea of a survey to Wilmington several years ago, but it was just last year that we got to start talking about it for real, thanks to Cape Fear Collective. So that history long here in Wilmington, and I'm excited to introduce you guys to Megan Lewis, who has been a staff member at the North Carolina Chamber, a staff member of the Wilmington Chamber of Commerce, and is now fully staffed on the Cape Fear Collective team to help us realize how we can all impact our community on a much broader basis, on a regional basis. Megan, love for you to share a lot more of that history and some of the reasons and the background behind the survey.
Yes, happy to, and thank you for that introduction. Good morning, everyone. As Natalie said, my name is Megan Lewis, Director of Programs with Cape Fear Collective. It's a pleasure to be here today to present the results of the Cape Fear Talent Survey. As Natalie mentioned, this is certainly a year in the making, if not longer. And we couldn't have gotten here today without some critical partners that Natalie mentioned, many of whom are listening in today. And before we jump into the data, I'd like to take the opportunity to recognize a few of those partners now. First, the survey wouldn't be possible without the investment and partnership of Wake County Economic Development, a program of the Raleigh Chamber of Commerce, the City of Raleigh, and the Capital Area Workforce Development Board. These 3 partners invested in the survey development back in 2017. recognizing the need to pair regional workforce data with data available statewide on employer needs. They developed an inclusive process, bringing together leaders in industry with education collaboration on workforce priorities on the back end. So thank you, and I know you all are tuning in to our work today. To share their investment by bringing this survey to other regions, including the Cape Fear. Next, I'd like to thank Natalie and the Wilmington Chamber for help bringing this survey to life in our region. We knew at Cape Fear Collective that we needed organizations like the Wilmington Chamber to help encourage employers in our region to complete yet another survey. It was due to the collaborative partnership with folks like the Wilmington Chamber of Commerce, the Cape Fear, Eastern Carolina, and Lumber River Workforce Development Boards, regional chambers of commerce, economic development associations, regional and statewide trade associations, certainly our partners in education, both at the K-12 and higher ed levels, and others, over 50 partners in all, that helped us reach 500 some employers with this survey, even in the midst of a global pandemic. We appreciate each and every one of you in supporting this initiative, and we look forward, as Natalie said, to working with you now that the data is in. Now, I'd like to introduce Mike Hogan with RTI International to present the findings. Excuse me. Mike is an economic development analyst at RTI International, helping build locally informed strategies for inclusive economic development. This is Mike's fourth iteration of this survey across North Carolina, so he's certainly an expert on this data, and we appreciate him joining us today. For our audience, please use the Q&A feature in Zoom or post questions in the comment section of the Facebook live streams, and we'll get to as many of those as we can after Mike's presentation. Natalie, any other words before we turn it over?
Just to clarify which Facebook feeds, right?
Yes,
so
thank you.
You want to do that? That'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay, the Wilmington Chamber of Commerce Facebook live feed, as well as WECT, our media partner in this event. So thank you so much to that partnership. They're always ready to help get the word out in the community about things that are important. So thank you, WECT.
Great, and now we'll turn it over to Mike. I invite you to share your presentation and get ready for Q&A afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Natalie. Thank you, Bo. It's an honor to be here this morning with all of you, and I'm really excited to be sharing this data with everybody and the findings. As we'll start to go through, as we go through this presentation, nothing about the last couple of months has been as we planned it would be. And so I just want to thank everybody who's been involved in this process for being very flexible, very willing to adapt quickly, and the success of this project in a big way is many thanks to Megan and to Cape Fear Collective and all their partners who decided that collectively we were going to push on despite a really unprecedented economic situation. So thank you. And I will go ahead and get started with the presentation portion of this. So to start, I want to say again, thank you to our local collaborators, Cape Fear Collective and the Wilmington Chamber, and all of the partners that helped out on this. For a brief introduction, my name is Michael Hogan. I represent RTI International. RTI is Research Triangle Institute. We are a North Carolina-based independent nonprofit research institute that does work all over the US, all over the world, ranging from public health, education, economic development, environment, you name it, RTI is probably doing some research in it. And much of the work that we do comes from large federal contracts, international development projects, but we think that it's really important that we work specifically here in North Carolina. North Carolina is our home. This is where we live. And the success of the economy and the impact of our research in the state of North Carolina is really important to us. So it's always a pleasure to be able to work locally. Today, what we're going to go over, and knowing the context as we get into the survey, this is really a first look at a very rich and detailed data set. And our goal this morning is not to go into the details of each data point, but really to give you a whole understanding of the work that we've done over the last couple of months, what the data is telling us right now at a high level and what it really means and how it can be acted upon in the Cape Fear region. So we're going to provide some background and context and overview of the survey, and then some high-level findings around hiring and skills and credentials, talk about initial takeaways and next steps, and then have Q&A. There will be much more detailed data coming out very soon in the kind of the full data book that Cape Fear Collective will be presenting. But for now, our focus is really on what is this data telling us in the big picture, especially in the context of our current economic situation. What is our current economic situation? To give us a little bit of background and context, where are we on September 1st, 2020? So the most recent data that we have available from the North Carolina Department of Commerce and from federal sources puts our unemployment rate around 8.5%. This is a very fluid, rapidly changing situation. And while this is an improvement from the peak at almost 15% in April, unemployments are still higher than pre-pandemic numbers. And accommodation and food services is really the hardest hit industry in the state when we talk about job losses. And this is of particular importance in the Cape Fear region that has a large base of jobs in tourism, hospitality, and restaurants. What does it mean for the Cape Fear region? Over the last couple of months, the unemployment situation has improved a bit. By June, the unemployment rate was 7.7%. This is an improvement from the prior month, and it's below state and national averages, but this still means there's a large portion of the workforce that's out of work and an uncertain future for the hospitality and tourism industry. So why are we talking about this? It has a lot to do with the purpose and the goal of what our survey has been, this work that we've done in the past, and to give a little context of where we are today. So we started doing this work with the Raleigh Chamber, Wake County Economic Development, and regional partners in 2017. That was this very exciting collaborative of public entities, chambers, workforce development, and other private sector and academic partners that started looking really actively at workforce and skills. We wanted to hear from employers, and we wanted to really set an agenda for workforce and economic development, bringing those two together and getting that conversation going. So we focused on getting input from businesses. Our goal was to ask the business community in the region, what are your hiring projections? What are your skills needs? What are the gaps? What are the credentials you're looking for? What are the networks that you're using to access talent? And start to get really region-specific data around what industry is saying. And we've done this work now across North Carolina, in the Triangle, in Asheville, in the Western region in 2018 and 2019. And then this year doing parallel work in the Triangle and in the Cape Fear region in the first 6 months of this year, which, as all of us know, have been a really unprecedented time for jobs and for workforce. And so what we've done in 2020 is we got together January, February, as Megan was talking about, realized, there's urgency to start to get more data around workforce and skills, and launched this survey mid-March. And most of us know what happened mid-March. As the pandemic started to hit North Carolina and businesses started to shut down, we asked ourselves, do we continue with this? Is it worth it? Is it appropriate to do it? And after a kind of long discussion, we realized this is going to be really important because we're going to be facing a real economic crisis. And it's going to be important for us to have good data about what jobs are going to look like. If we're going to be facing an unemployment crisis, how do we rebuild from this pandemic, and how do we help businesses address their talent needs and also provide resources for a lot of unemployed people who are going to be looking for work in the next couple of months. We ran the survey of employers from March 2020 through June 2020. We received 491 responses from businesses, representing a mix of business size and industry sectors. Some of the high-level summary stats presented here 82% of the responses were from New Hanover County. It represented a broad mix ranging from small, medium, and large businesses across many different sectors. So professional services, public sector, restaurants, healthcare, construction. So it's a very broad sample of businesses, but just one thing to note that statistically we're treating the data as a point in time snapshot. So it's not meant to represent other regions or other years. It's meant to be a pulse on the state of hiring and workforce in the region in this time frame. So it's not intended to be representative of other parts of the state or other businesses in the region. And as I mentioned, we launched the survey during the pandemic and economic crisis. While the survey itself was not designed to be a COVID-19 pandemic response survey, we really quickly pivoted to understand that we're going to be facing a tough jobs recovery over the next couple of years, and how can we best inform that for the region. So just re-emphasizing what Megan said before, thank you to the many partners who helped us to develop and share this survey regionally with the Wilmington Chamber and Cape Fear Collective, as well as the Raleigh Chamber, Wake County Economic Development, the City of Raleigh and Capital Area Workforce Development Board, and over 50 partners in the region that helped to distribute this survey to their membership, get the word out. So thank you all very much. So to the data. The first question that we asked, and the first question we kind of always ask, to grow your workforce in the next 3 years, asking businesses that very simple question helps us get a pulse on what sentiment is looking like. So of the 491 companies we surveyed, 56% said that they were planning to grow their workforce in the next three years, with only 3% saying they plan to downsize. So amid the pandemic and this jobs downturn, businesses are still expressing optimism about hiring, but it is lower than peer regions in previous years. So what we're optimistic about and what the data shows us is that companies are still planning for growth, and they're expecting to hire between 9,600 and 17,500 new employees in the next 3 years, with the highest numbers coming in healthcare, professional services, and IT. So while the numbers are reflective of a more challenging economic situation, employers are still anticipating hiring in the next 3 years. But there's a lot of difference in so this is industries in the Cape Fear region, with those all over 70% of companies saying that they're planning to grow in the next 3 years, and very few or none. So what it tells us is that the growth of life science and IT, it really mirrors the state. Those are industries that are booming everywhere that we're looking across the state and looking for very skilled talent. But also we found it really interesting that logistics really stands out. That's a very high percentage compared to other data that we've seen. And so what it shows us is that this is perhaps an emerging area to diversify the regional economy and identify new workforce opportunities for people. At the same time, we looked at restaurants and hospitality, construction, public sector, services, and retail are expressing a less optimistic outlook on growth, particularly in a region that has such a strong tourism-based economy. The responses from restaurants and hospitality, with only 39% of companies saying that they plan to grow in the next 3 years, and over 12% saying they plan to downsize, does represent a much less optimistic outlook on hiring and the way that companies are seeing the workforce in the retail and hospitality, or restaurant and hospitality sector. So there's a large divergence across industries in terms of how they're viewing this recovery from the pandemic. And a lot of this mirrors what we've seen at the state level, but also I think logistics and warehousing is one kind of piece that stands out as an interesting opportunity for growth for the region. When we look at the number of jobs that companies are projecting to add, and these are the sample of companies that we surveyed, the largest number overall comes in healthcare, professional services, and IT services that are expecting to hire over 2,000 new employees in the next 3 years. This is, I think, an interesting opportunity when we look at what where companies are seeing a less optimistic outlook on growth in things like retail, restaurants and hospitality, construction and skilled trades that have a little bit lower projection of growth. There are going to be a lot of job openings in some of these sectors that I think are going to present an interesting kind of challenge for companies that are looking to hire in those areas. And I'll get into a few details on the skills and positions that those companies are looking for in a few minutes. When we asked across the board all of the companies about the credentials they're looking for in their future workforce, the most frequently cited were professional certifications and community college programs. Of those, additionally, 40% were looking for four-year college degrees and 21% looking for apprenticeships. And so the largest number of companies are looking for staff that have community college degrees and professional certifications. But there's also a place for, and a need for four-year degrees and apprenticeships. And so the approach to workforce from the responses we've gotten from companies is they're looking for a little bit of everything, with the largest number looking for community colleges and professional certifications, but also across the board, kind of a mix, and it's very industry specific. More of those details will be provided at an industry level in the data book that Cape Fear Collective is putting out. But for now, most employers across the board are providing their current employees with on-the-job training, and some are providing continuing education at universities and community colleges for upskilling their existing workforce. One input we got from a lot of companies and a lot of the comments that they sent us as a product of the survey was that in addition to looking at how they want to how companies want to build their future workforce, they're also facing a challenge in how to upskill their existing workforce. As I am speaking to you from my living room, the transition for a lot of companies to remote work, to introduction of digital technologies very quickly, has emphasized that companies are looking for staff that are able to adapt quickly to changing business scenarios, and that has really accelerated over the last couple of months. We also asked kind of the question that everyone wants to know about, that what are the qualities or soft skills that are the hardest to find in the workforce. Discipline, critical thinking, and taking initiative are the three that have come to the top. And I would say every workforce survey that we've done over the last couple of years, when we ask employers what are their needs in terms of soft skills and employee qualities, those are the ones that rise to the top. Professionalism, willing to work long hours, time management, interpersonal skills are all really, really important. But those continue to be the three that are cited as the most difficult to find. And finally, we asked, what is your opinion of the talent pipeline, just on a scale of 1 to 5? Companies rated it as about a 2.88 out of 5, so slightly above average, but still, or slightly kind of around average, but still with a lot of room for improvement. The best talent pipeline ratings by industry came from the retail, healthcare, and public sector. And so there's a large disparity, particularly in some of these industries that are planning kind of the most growth in the next couple of years. Looking at things like logistics, professional services, manufacturing, IT, they have a below average outlook on the talent pipeline. So it presents to us kind of an unmet need and a room for opportunity to address some of the challenges in the talent pipeline, especially because those are the industries that are projecting the most growth in the next couple of years. I'm going to go over a couple of initial takeaways from this data and kind of where we go next before we move into kind of the Q&A section. But our goal here is to really present some of the high level takeaways and what does this mean for the region in kind of our current economic context. first, and kind of the biggest thing that industries. So companies in life science, IT, logistics, and healthcare are kind of the most optimistic about the number of new jobs and their outlook on growth. And the positions that they're looking to fill are requiring specialized skills and credentials. So growth is going to be pretty uneven. We think that based on this data, industries like IT, healthcare, manufacturing, logistics are going to be more optimistic about growth. They're going to generate new jobs, but others are less optimistic. Hospitality, tourism, retail, public sector, and services are projecting slower growth or downsizing in the next 3 years. And this is a real challenge for the coastal economy, which relies on tourism for a large share of jobs and income. And so there's a call to action with this data that's going to require some upskilling and connecting unemployed workers with new opportunities in growing sectors. Companies across industry are asking for specialized skills, but they're increasingly asking for adaptability and on-the-job training as the nature of work changes quickly. Trends in digitalization are being accelerated by the pandemic, and so digital literacy across different industries is going to be a really critical skill. In addition to companies talking about empathy and interpersonal skills and the ability to work in a more challenging job environment for everybody. The life science, IT, and healthcare are going to continue to grow, and they're going to continue to provide job opportunities that require a mix of these universal skills and specialized skills. So just noting a few of the top kind of in-demand professions that are based on the data that we saw from the survey: nurses and health aides in the healthcare sector, software developers, administrative assistants and marketers in professional services, and then software programmers and engineers in IT services. Just when we ask companies, what are the kind of positions you expect to have most openings in the next 3 years? There are also some notably difficult positions that companies said they're looking for: data scientists in IT, therapists and specialists in healthcare, and then a lot of challenges around skilled trade roles: plumbers, maintenance technicians, mechanics. And we see this in construction, we see it in logistics, we see it in manufacturing. So there are opportunities and there are challenges in the kinds of jobs and the workforce needs that companies are going to have in the next couple of years. And finally, there are really underutilized resources in the region for networking, recruiting, and hiring. Something that we find frequently is when we ask companies, where do you most often source your talent? Friends and networks is typically the most frequent way. This is across industries, most typically found among small businesses, but also among larger businesses as well. And it generates challenges for companies that are looking to diversify their workforce and broaden their talent pool. So online job portals and social media are starting to get higher rates of adoption than in past years. But while in-person career fairs and conferences are going to be on hold, we have, I think, a chance to rethink the way that we network and recruit. We can break down barriers for companies and job seekers and really widen that the net that companies are casting when they're looking for new talent. So we see that there are resources here that companies are underutilizing, and particularly among small businesses that may not have access necessarily to career fairs at universities or community colleges, or don't necessarily have the resources to do internship programs. And so it's with this shift that we've seen, there's a new call to start to utilize some of these resources, particularly in the industries that tend to have a lower evaluation of the talent pipeline. So our next steps, Cape Fear Collective, Wilmington Chamber, RTI, and its partners are continuing to share this data regionally and statewide. We're looking at audiences in industry, economic development, workforce development, and there will be a full report with industry-specific data available on Cape Fear Collective's website. That's going to go over a lot of what we've talked about in a really detailed way, as I've shown here, across all the industries, with specific findings about positions, industry-specific skills, and credentials. So we'll be sharing that link with this group today as well. So I want to move into kind of our discussion and Q&A here. I'm going to close out my screen share and hand it back over to the team at Cape Fear Collective Wilmington Chamber to start the conversation.
Thank you, Mike, very much. We appreciate all the work that you have put into the analyzing this data for us. That brings up a part of the IT sector, right, is about analyzing data. Those are also jobs that we are finding over the last decade or so to be even more necessary as we continue to collect more and more data from those of us who are using more and more technology. So we're going to have Megan help facilitate our conversation. She'll also be a part of it. Mike will also be a part of that conversation. He has not left. We've had some questions about whether you'll have access to slides and data. As Mike mentioned, we will be posting the report on Cape Fear Collective's website as well as the Chamber's website. So you'll be able to access it in those places. We'd also love to answer any questions that you have. We'll do as many as we can. We have allocated until 11:30 for this conversation, and we'll stay for that long if you want to. We have over almost 130 people involved in the Zoom meeting who registered through the Chamber of Commerce, and then we don't know how many are watching Facebook Live on the Wilmington Chamber's Facebook page and on the WECT Facebook page. But each of those places is where you can post questions, and we have staff helping us identify those questions. And so I think, Megan, you had a first question you wanted to kick us off with.
Yeah, happy to. Just a few to get us started. And as Natalie said, continue to post questions. Thankfully, friends at the Wilmington Chamber and WECT are helping feed us those questions. So we'll get to as many as we can. Bill, I'd like to start with you. So you work with clients all the time at Human Capital Solutions on their specific talent needs. Does this data resonate with you, with what you've seen recently as far as growing industries and even skill requirements?
It really does. We certainly try to keep our ear to the rail on opportunities and gaps for leadership and for technical skills. The two ladders, of course, is the individual contributor ladder and the managerial leadership ladder. Always challenging to find folks with technology ability and also have the interpersonal and communicative skill sets to be the full package, if you will, for leadership progression and promotional roles. So some folks do amazingly well in the individual contributor ladder. They're great technologists, haven't mastered being an expert communicator. And then there's others who tend to be working on both of those development areas that go on to be executives for large organizations.
Great. Yeah, we certainly saw that need, the mix of technical skills and interpersonal communication skills from this data, certainly from our local employers. Thank you for that. Natalie, I'd pose a similar question to you. Are you finding Wilmington Chamber members are mostly optimistic about their growth, and anything in particular you're hearing about talent needs?
I think to the point that Mike made during the presentation, it depends on the sector. And as he mentioned, hospitality has been hit hard this year. It was hit hard 2 years ago following Hurricane Florence, and we are in Hurricane Alley, so that will happen again. Others, as the survey data tells us, are expecting and are optimistic about future growth opportunities. I think that those industries, even those that are less optimistic, that have invested in some of the strategic planning and reskilling activities during the pandemic, I think they're going to come out of this faster and probably stronger than those that might not have had that capacity to invest in the reskilling. That's what we're hearing from our members. There are questions sometimes too from people who know there's talent in our region, because we're really fortunate. We have this beautiful region that we live in, and we have college students who come here and they don't want to leave when they graduate, and so they take a job that they may be overqualified for so that they can stay in the region. So we know there's talent in the region. Is there a disconnect between employers and talent? Absolutely. And surveys like this help us to identify where that gap in communication is so that we can identify the talent and match it with the industry or the employer.
Great. Thank you for that. So Mike, you've now led 4 iterations of the survey across North Carolina. You shared a little bit about how our region compares as far as growth specifically, but can you talk a little bit more about comparisons across these other regions and how much, if you can measure, of that regional difference might be attributed to the pandemic specifically?
There are a lot of findings that we've seen in this region that are similar to everywhere we look across North Carolina. I think when we look at the industry attitudes about hiring and growth, and we break them down by industry, those are things that we see across the state. So healthcare, life science, IT, some manufacturing sectors are looking at continuing to look at high growth over the next couple of years, and they're continuing to look for a skilled workforce that's adaptable. There are some differences, and I think some things that make the Cape Fear region unique. I think one is while we got just a small sample of employers in logistics, I think that's an interesting opportunity and something that we haven't seen everywhere across the state. So the attitude that logistics companies in the region have about growth is pretty high. So I think that's one thing that makes it unique. But addressing the pandemic, when we look at the company's projections of growth in the Triangle region and then in the Cape Fear region, collecting data at the exact same time, the data looks really similar, which leads me to believe that a lot of it is due to the pandemic. That's had a really uneven impact across the economy. I think one area that the pandemic has had a greater hit on in the Cape Fear region is in the hospitality and tourism sector. So that's one area that makes the Cape Fear region unique, in that there's a much more positive and optimistic outlook from the logistics sector, and a more concerned outlook from the restaurant, hospitality, and tourism sectors. So I think those are a couple areas where the region is unique, but I also think that this is just mirroring a lot of the changes that we've seen as a result of the pandemic and the economic crisis.
Thanks for that. And as we talked about when we decided to kind of continue on with this, even in the midst of the pandemic, hopefully the Cape Fear region and certainly Western North Carolina, around Asheville and the Triangle, may be in a better position to respond to this pandemic now that we have this data. Natalie, really to that point, why was it so important to implement this survey in our region, especially now?
Well, as I said, we've been talking about the talent needs of employers for as long as I've been in this business. And so it's always been important. And the U.S. Chamber Foundation and the North Carolina Chamber Foundation created a program called Talent Pipeline Management. We've been saying TPM around the Chamber building now for over a year, and it is a proven process for bringing together employers hiring a like skill set, who are challenged in finding that skill set. And so pulling those employers together, and we hope they're all chamber members, and asking the questions, what is missing in this particular type of position? And then partnering with education institutions, organizations like our workforce development boards and NC Works, as well as the Cape Fear Workforce Development Board. The Swain Center is a resource in this. Step Up Wilmington is a resource. We have so many resources. And as Bo likes to say, if we're not all paddling down the same way down the river, then we may not be successful. And so the idea behind Talent Pipeline Management is to get the hiring managers together to talk about what are the like traits we need, and then how do we train those individuals who are looking for better opportunity. It's not just people looking for work, but somebody who might be looking to find a better opportunity, and partnering all of that. And we have plans. We are excited about launching the collaborative efforts and are so grateful to Cape Fear Collective for providing some infrastructure there to make that happen.
Great, thank you. So I'd like each of us to answer this quickly. Mike, feel free to jump in as well. especially with your background in other regions. Bo, we talked a little bit about this yesterday. What are some outcomes you hope to see from this report? We're all committed that it's not going to sit on a shelf and collect dust. So what are some outcomes you're hoping to see? We'll start with Bo.
Well, thank you for asking the question. Oftentimes in survey collection and dissemination of the data, we can certainly be illuminated and be enthused to take action. The challenge is often that there are a lot of oars in the water, and is it possible to try to get us paddling and synergize and align and collaborate? So perhaps this is a call to action to other leaders of organizations that have this as a priority to collaborate in some fashion. What does that look like? So I would like to see that, of course, and I'm optimistic that now is the time. We do have the landscape here of an amazing, I've lived all over the country, the West Coast and Gulf Coast. This region has more resources, and there's going to be even more people coming here due to working remotely. Residential realtors around the three-county area are experiencing one of their best years, and some of that is we're spending more time at home, and if I can work from anywhere, why not work from Wrightsville Beach or Wilmington? And so I'm very excited about that. So I think outcomes are, how do we grow more controlled growth? How do we invite other leaders who are in economic development and academia to join and collaborate to be more effective as we address this?
Absolutely. And Natalie and Mike would love your answers on outcomes too, but Bo just touched on a question from our audience is, what is the nature of the collaboration outside of this report? Certainly, we're going to convene these survey partners, that long list. And I should mention that wasn't even a complete list of partners. We'll continue to pull that group together in response to this data. That Wilmington Chamber and Cape Fear Collective are also in constant meetings with the Triangle region and those survey partners, and even Western North Carolina partners on how we're each leveraging this data and scaling some best practices. And then I'll touch on another question from the audience. We do feel like there's an opportunity to tie this regional survey into a statewide platform. Organizations like My Future NC that are focused on really measuring post-secondary attainment and what credentials are of value to employers. We're hopeful that an organization like My Future or one similar might help backbone this type of survey in other regions of the state. Certainly, we've seen the value. So Natalie, sorry for that. Back to what's an outcome you hope to see?
So you said hope. We're hopeful.
Yeah.
I'm way beyond. I'm so much bolder than hopeful. We are going to share the data with policymakers across the state, certainly at the statewide level through organizations like My Future NC to advocate for whatever policy changes might need to be made alongside the partners in the education and workforce development institutions to help us address that pipeline development, so that we ultimately are going back to grade school even to educate students on the types of education that they need, and then in middle school starting to educate them on which path gets them where, and help them choose those pathways with much more recognition of what the opportunities might be. And Bo talked about how attractive our community is, and it is, and we will start to see more people here, which means more industries are going to need help. When you talk about that right now, our hospitality sector isn't as optimistic as our IT or healthcare sectors. The more employment we attract here and grow here, the more that sector will pick back up again. So it's all connected, and it's really exciting. But I'm bold, and I'm impassioned about our ability to affect change in a different way than I think we have, because I think the oars are all paddling in a very similar direction. Our economic development partners in the region have been a part of this effort. They know that if they can't prove the talent is available, then they can't be successful in the recruitment of the companies. And so this is an all-in strategy, and I think that we are all in at this time.
Great. Mike, I wondered if you wanted to share an outcome, not even for the Cape Fear region, but for the survey overall. And I might introduce another kind of round robin question, get Bo and Natalie thinking about this. What stood out most to you also about the data? So outcomes and kind of something telling that you saw from the Cape Fear region.
Yeah. So first, to respond to your first question around outcomes, I'll context this by saying at RTI, we're a research institute, and typically a lot of what we do is create a lot of really interesting surveys with a lot of interesting data, but we also have a mission of turning knowledge into practice. And so when I hear Bo say, we need to keep this going, we need to take action, this needs to be something more than just an interesting report that sits on a shelf, I really want to just re-emphasize that. But keeping that in mind, I think the kind of action and the kind of outcome that I would like to see coming from this is addressing this, the reality that we're in right now with the Cape Fear region having unemployment between 7 and 8%. A lot of people are out of work, and if this data can be used to inform how we address this very big challenge in the region right now, not just in the region, not just in the state, nationally, but really being able to focus in the region and look at this large swath of the workforce that's out of work, identifying new opportunities for them, and getting unemployed workers the types of training, credentials, and connections to jobs in these high growth industries. If this data can be used to inform that, I would say that would be a really, I would feel proud of the outcomes of this work. And then your second question, I forgot it.
Yeah, just what part of the data stood out most to you?
I think the part that stood out to me is that businesses continue to be optimistic about hiring. We know that this has been a very challenging economic time over the last couple of months, and if you spend time kind of watching the news, it can often feel like a lot of doom and gloom coming from a lot of the economic numbers. But when I see things like this, I'm reminded businesses are still optimistic about growth. They're still looking to hire, and they're looking to hire and put people in quality jobs, in things like healthcare, IT, logistics, manufacturing, life science, construction, and trades. And so it did surprise me to see how optimistic businesses were about hiring and growth over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I would echo that. We were, as we were getting data updates kind of throughout, the survey was in the field for those of you listening. Really, we launched it Friday, March 13th, right before the stay-at-home order, and closed it just before the July 4th holiday. So some context there, and as we were getting data updates, was excited to see that optimism come through. So Natalie and Bo, again, kind of what stood out to you most from the survey? Bo, do you want to get started?
I thought Michael may talk about logistics and warehousing, which what I'd assume would include supply chain and transportation. And that's been an area of our business that's really been impressive and a little surprising. We have some more non-traditional clients, small to mid-sized businesses that have been finding talent through referrals and some of the drop down you saw earlier, networking and posting on Indeed and Monster. And they have found that their needs, overall needs, have not been met according to growth and leadership. And so we're very thankful that we've seen some of these logistics, transportation, supply chain businesses think out of the box and try a firm like ours for leadership development. And we're now it's like things are Amazonable, right? And it's a new term that we're learning to digest. I mean, food now is Amazonable and Uber treats, and we've got friends around the country that are really suffering from restaurant restrictions, and having to get very creative. And they're getting creative with logistics and supply chain and new delivery services. So that one was kind of cool to see You ride up to Raleigh and you see the new Amazon Center. Forget what county that's
Garner. Yeah, it's in
Garner.
right? Yeah.
And this is just the tip of the iceberg of things to come. So.
Yeah, and I would love to revisit talking about kind of the recruitment and utilizing some of the resources that are here, like Human Capital Solutions. Natalie, what outcome stood out to you?
I have to echo a little bit. It's logistics, and partly surprise, but really more confirmation of what I've been hearing through the pandemic. First we were fearful that we couldn't get the PPE we needed. And so we started questioning as a country whether we need to reshore some of that manufacturing. And certainly some manufacturers transitioned quickly to try to cover us and provide us the PPE we needed. We also, I believe, we have a phenomenal port here in Wilmington. We also have a great port in Morehead City. And so we have the facilities to accept and then distribute. And so a continued investment in the training that's needed. Cape Fear Community College responded with some revamping of their truck driving school, recognizing that the pandemic presented some challenges, but then also the time the classes were offered. You don't think about the little things like that, but they've revamped the program so that more people can participate in it and become a part of that logistics, skills and talent pipeline. And then when you think about logistics, it's transportation. And so I have to put in a plug for the North Carolina Chambers Coalition Destination 2030. If you haven't heard about it, I encourage you to go to the NC Chamber website and look at Destination 2030. It's about, let's get bold with our policymakers with regard to policy and funding and financing of transportation infrastructure. As we do reshore some of these manufacturers, we need to be sure that their product can get out from the North Carolina port at Wilmington all the way to California ultimately. And so investment in continued transportation infrastructure in our state is critical. We're woefully behind right now. So.
Yeah, great opportunity to, especially to repurpose or reskill some of the workforce, maybe in slower industries to rebound. Mm-hmm. So, Bo, I'd like to revisit this, the data point that Mike presented about most industries and most employers surveyed very heavily reliant on friends and local networks and word of mouth to get out recruiting. We know that that's not going to be a solution to increase diversity in their workforce. What are you finding? You spoke about logistics coming to Human Capital Solutions. How do we broaden out the resources? And Natalie would ask this of you too, that employers are using to really identify new talent pools.
Well, that's an excellent question, and one I spend a lot of my days informing, educating, and perhaps selling. If you begin with the end in mind on human capital, we enjoy having dialogue around return on investment, internal rate of return, return on investment. Most of us would say that human capital is the most valuable asset any company has. Interestingly enough, human capital doesn't sit on the balance sheet. And so there's perhaps more opportunity to be working on some calculus of return on investment and internal rate of return. Because if I'm looking at the cost of acquiring human capital and the cost only, and I don't know the return on investment, I may not venture out and utilize other mediums and methods like a search firm. And so we learned a long time ago that to help a decision maker feel comfortable and good about making a purchasing decision around engaging a search firm, we need to help them with the calculus. Making the wrong hire, making the bad hire, having key positions open for an extended period of time and the cost of that associated. So there's a number of variables and factors, if you will, that sometimes do not go communicated or known. So.
Well, and I would follow that with encouraging job seekers and employers to pay attention to social media activity. I mean, I know that Human Capital Solutions and Green Resources and Leaf HR, and I could go on, and somebody's going to be mad at me because I didn't mention their company, but there are lots of companies that are not only selling their services well and for good reason, but then also utilizing social media to connect with the right talent, especially, but even employers are doing a better job. And so if you're a job seeker, don't discount accessing social media and letting a Human Capital Solutions know that you're an available talent to be hired.
Yeah, and I think to pair with that, one of the questions too, there's resources at NC Works, at our workforce development boards, really focused on the job seeker, organizations like Step Up Wilmington. I would encourage employers to look at that data and, those HR professionals, where are you recruiting? And is it giving you access to the largest data or talent pool, and certainly as it relates to diversity inclusion of your workforce as well. We want to make sure those networks and recruiting sources are diversified.
And Megan, making sure that employers know that NC Works and our workforce development boards have resources for employers. There are training resources paid for through federal grants that if you fear investing in your talent, there might be resources to help you do that. And then once you get that return on investment, you'll have a better appreciation for why you want to invest in it.
Yeah, great point. So looking at some of the audience questions, a lot of questions around, what are some of the jobs, what are the jobs in some of these industry-specific categories? How are those broken down? I really encourage everyone to download the full report to see that. Each industry is broken down by not only the hardest positions to fill in those industries, but also, the most openings by job position, and then breaking down the skills specifically needed for those industries. So again, linked on the Wilmington Chamber and the Cape Fear Collective website to download those full snapshots with a kind of clear breakdown of what these industries mean. I want to touch on a little bit this opinion that employers have of the talent pipeline. I know for me, that was the finding I was most excited to see. What is just the baseline of how employers are feeling about the ability to source talent here locally. Any thoughts on that rating, and or how do we continue to see that opinion rise?
Natalie?
Well, I think some of that opinion is based on history's impact and a perception. So I think that we have a phenomenal talent pool here. And as we talked earlier about, some of it might be underemployed. We are also growing knowledge jobs in this community at a rapid rate. And so there's a disconnect in between the perception and the reality there. And we need to continue to explain that not only to the employers who completed this survey, but to the individuals who are looking for a job or a better job.
I'm very excited about the fintech industry and the corridors that are coming online. We have an office in Atlanta, the Alpharetta area, and we have a corridor building here of fintech, of course, and Encino is leading the way. We are excited about continued contract research organizations and another corridor of researchers, very bright, energetic folks that love our area, and now with the new normal, the employer may be in Chicago or New Jersey, and their residents can be here, and we would receive the benefits of having those high quality individuals that live and work in Wilmington.
Great. Mike, too, I would just ask any feedback on that opinion rating, and then how might it compare? I believe it was right in line with other regions, but would you care to add to that at all?
It is very in line with other regions. So I think from a data point of view, it's common to see companies have a more critical view of the talent pipeline. Companies are always going to be looking for the best staff that they can find. So it's very subjective. I will say that it has a lot to do with the opinion of the person taking the survey. And then believe Natalie mentioned in some areas we might have, the Cape Fear region may have a workforce that might be overqualified in certain sectors as well. So to see retail have a really positive opinion of the talent pipeline versus somebody like construction that has a far more critical opinion of the talent pipeline, to me could indicate that there might be a mismatch between the kind of talent that's being offered and the skills that are needed. And so we typically see construction and skilled trades have a lower opinion of the talent pipeline. And a lot of that has to do with construction companies talking about just the struggle to find skilled tradespeople. So that's just kind of one example of where we see those opinions coming from.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the construction industry. As Natalie mentioned, we are starting the conversation with that industry immediately following this event, and wanting to recognize the perception of the job seeker of these industries too, and how can we better connect that potential talent pool with these varying and growing industries. So I want to address just one, sorry, pulling up that question. So how can we talk about how do we help organize employers or trade associations or education and training providers to provide some of this professional development? Natalie, you spoke already about some of the offerings at NC Works, but and I should mention too that the Lower Cape Fear Human Resources Association was a partner with us on the survey. We welcome the opportunity to present this data in front of any of these organizations, but do you see some next steps as far as providing some of this training directly for employers?
Well, I think, yes. I think certainly the NC Works partnership. There's also the Department of Commerce is launching Next Gen partnerships around, an all-encompassing look at what particular industry sectors are needing. Megan mentioned the construction collaborative we're meeting about immediately following this event. As we look at this data, identifying the next groups of industries that we need to pull together, I was encouraged on Michael's slide that talks about the different credentials needed. I was encouraged by the number of companies that said apprenticeships. I think that, countries in Europe have been so good for decades at offering apprenticeships, which combine working with with a paycheck and continued improvement, and so U.S. companies have been a little slower to that game, and especially non-manufacturers. And yet, it's a great opportunity to find a talent that may already have the soft skills you're looking for, a person who might have the drive and the initiative, but maybe doesn't yet have the skill set. You hire them, maybe you send them to a class, but you also train them to your way of doing things. It's a phenomenal model for how to truly develop someone, and the kind of loyalty that creates when you invest in someone. They have tremendous loyalty to you for that investment. And so I do know that there are partnerships that we will be accessing to help our employers see the value of that continued investment, whether it's in the front end, in talent acquisition, or in the middle space of development of talent, or in a later promotional status of investing in leadership development. I think across the board, that investment is really critical. And I believe that this is the time that we can get government to partner with business to make those investments.
Absolutely. And helping lead with the data, lead with employers, that's certainly kind of at the forefront of talent pipeline management that we're exploring with companies, and would love to have that discussion with you and other employers that are listening and feel like you need some help or facilitation and how to get started. Really making it authentically employer-led and data-driven is what we're hoping this data can do. I would like to just say that we welcome kind of feedback on this data. We welcome additional information to pair with this data. Bo would love to stay in contact with what you're hearing at Human Capital Solutions for regional perspective. And similarly at Cape Fear Collective, this is one piece of a broader data collection effort. So I hope you'll stay tuned as we release a broader community data platform that covers the social deterrents of health, work, and education. We know some of that needs to be addressed to fully meet the needs of these employers, so that's certainly coming too. Have been receiving some questions. I know we've covered quite a bit in this 30 minutes of Q&A. Just want to reiterate again that the report is available for download on our websites. Mike, Bo, Natalie, any kind of parting words or calls to action as we wrap up?
Go ahead, Natalie.
Well, my call to action is to stay engaged and to recognize whether you are an employer looking for talent or you are the talent looking for the employment, that it's a conversation that has to happen across, including agencies like education institutions or nonprofit partners that are helping develop the talent in whether it's in soft skills or, although I will suggest, let's stop calling them soft skills, because there's nothing soft about needing these skills. They're power skills, is what someone said to me. A speaker I heard said they call them power skills. They are power skills because they will help you transition from the access to the job into that leadership development space. And so you need them ultimately anyway. And so I encourage you to work on obtaining those power skills if you're an individual looking for an opportunity. And I would say to the policymakers that are on this call now and those that we're going to be talking to, please help us find the ways that we invest in the talent. As Megan mentioned, the only way we will continue to grow our economy is if we continue to develop the talent. We know that we have a graying workforce. We know that populations that are demographics that are following the baby boomer generation are smaller. So we know that we're going to have a smaller workforce in our country, and we need to make sure that it is diverse, because we are the melting pot, and we are proud of that diversity that we have in our community and in our country. And so figuring out the ways that we take this data and actually put it to work to grow our economy, because ultimately it's about economic development. Jobs won't grow, companies won't grow if we can't also create, build, and offer the talent that they're looking for.
Yeah.
Great. Several years ago, our firm knew from demand we needed to start another division called Coaching and Consulting Services. It's been nearly 5 years ago. And through that division, we have a process that I could just like to share, maybe 60 to 90 seconds, some acronyms that may add value to the audience today. The first acronym is SARA, S-A-R-A. It stands for shock, anger, retribution or resentment, and acceptance. Shock, anger, resentment, and acceptance. It's the grieving process. And so what we know as humans, when we lose something of value, we grieve. It doesn't necessarily have to be a loved one. It may be a job, maybe the passion in the current job. We talk to some folks that are looking to make a move. They're still employed, and they find out that they're in the grieving process. And so when you are networking and interviewing, we don't do so well if we're in the shock, anger, resentment. In this country right now is quite divided, I'm afraid, and there's a lot of anger and resentment. If you are in the workplace today, and if you're looking to make a change, I encourage you to do what you may know to do to get to full acceptance. Full acceptance sounds something like, you know, Natalie, I don't think I've ever been more excited than I am today about my career. Let me tell you why. Maybe you're not there, but you know that would be awesome to get there. The next acronym in this process is DIG, D-I-G. It stands for Discipline, Industry, Geography. What we find when we are hired by an employer, the employer believes we are subject matter experts in their industry, and we have subject matter expertise in the discipline of the role they have open. The same is true for candidates. If you're a candidate today, think about what discipline you're a subject matter expert in, and what industry or industries do you have the most passion around. I tell my granddaughter that we always do better at jobs that we like. So learn to like school, learn to like things, and we do better in it. When we dislike it, we don't do so well. So G is geography. We solve for geography. It's usually the first factor we solve in the equation. My family and I have to live in Chicago. My parents are there, or we don't want to leave Wilmington. So discipline, industry, geography. The next acronym is SOAR, S-O-A-R. It stands for situation, organization, action, results. We have used PAR before, problem, action, results. Companies are looking for problem solvers today. And if you are an excellent problem solver, you're going to be more marketable. Your compensation may be higher if you're an excellent problem solver. Situation, organization, action, results. So think about if you've been in a workplace for 10 years, what are the 10 largest problems you've helped solve? What actions did you put into place? And what were the favorable financial results you helped your company achieve? That's the part that's usually short and lacking that has the most opportunity, favorable financial results. So you need a salary of X, you need benefits, you're going to cost the company this amount of money. The more you can effectively convince them about the return on investment, about these favorable financial results, the more attractive, the more offers that you'll have. So.
Great. Well, I think this, certainly this data is going to help with at least the DIG acronym, right? Knowing certainly what's available here in the Cape Fear region, a lot to offer and a lot of opportunities. Mike, I would just love to, again, thank you for your presentation and offer you the opportunity for any kind of closing words. It's been a long process. I was with you back in 2017 when the Triangle first implemented this. So just any kind of closing remarks and what you're optimistic about now that we have this data.
There were several things that came up over the course of the conversation, some of the Q&A, some of the questions that were submitted, some of the chat, and I want to try to bundle them up into a single thing. But something that has, I think one of the most challenging pieces was around how employers valued that quality of the talent pipeline, which some of which it's subjective, it's employer opinion. Some of it has to do with employers just struggling to hire the kind of workforce that they need. Some of it has to do with the disconnect. But I think there's a few things that that showed up in the survey that can speak to that. One is around networks, and that from when we hear from employers that they're really struggling with their talent pipeline, but then we ask them, well, what does your talent pipeline look like? Where are you recruiting? And they start listing off kind of, well, we're recruiting from our friends and networks, we're recruiting from internal employee references, we're recruiting people who look like us, or people who come from the same background that we do, or went to the same college we did, or come from the same community we did. It can create a challenge in terms of broadening and diversifying the workforce. So I think one area to move on as a result of the survey as well is really broadening those networks that companies are using to hire from, especially in light of how many resources that there are. And just from listening to the chat and getting some messages from some of the guests and questions over the course of this presentation, I'm hearing, hey, we have this resource. Our community college has this resource. UNCW has this resource. There's a lot of resources here. We're excited about apprenticeships. And so identifying what those resources are in the community, ones that are being underutilized, ones that have a lot of potential, but maybe all the pieces aren't put together quite yet. Things like apprenticeships can provide a lot of opportunities and can be done in a way that we're not creating anything new. We don't have to spend any new money. We just need to better connect some of the resources that exist in the community. I think that was a encouraging finding from the survey and from some of the input that we've gotten over the course of this presentation. So I hope I was able to package that up into a single coherent thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll reiterate what Bo has already said too about getting us rowing in the same direction. Certainly that was part of the reason Cape Fear Collective was founded, to help provide some of the backbone support, the project management and data science, like projects like Cape Fear Collective or Cape Fear Talent, to help get us rowing in the same direction, because we do have so many resources, so many folks in the nonprofit community and employers themselves that are working to solve a lot of our community's challenges. And so if this can be one piece to help that collaboration, I think that's a win. Natalie, I'll just turn it over to you if you have any closing remarks.
Super. Thank you, Megan, so much. Thank you all for joining, whether you are in the official Zoom meeting or if you are on Facebook Live, either at the Chamber's Facebook page or on WECT, our media partners Facebook page. We appreciate you joining us. I want to thank all the partners. As Megan said, there are 50 plus listed on the back page, inside back page of the report. So when you see it, look at all of those partners. I will venture to guess that you are touched by at least one of those partners that are on that list, because Megan did a phenomenal job of reaching out across the region. And our partners in the counties around New Hanover County were engaged. I would say too, don't be discouraged if you're outside New Hanover County and saw that more responses happened in New Hanover County. You know, we have commuting patterns in this region that say that a lot of people who are in your county are traveling into New Hanover County to work. And there is no county economy that is not dependent. We are the Cape Fear region, and we work together to address all of these employment challenges, economic development challenges. They are regional challenges. And I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Human Capital Solutions, and Bo Birch specifically, not only for your sponsorship of this event, but your passion around developing talent and helping employers find the right talent, and also your commitment to Wilmington and the Cape Fear region. Thank you, Bo.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you all
Absolutely.
for joining us today. It's been a great pleasure.
It has been. I'd just like to give a little heads up on a couple of things happening around the Chamber over the next few months. We have a little election coming up in November, and so there will be lots of commercials on television. You'll be able to learn a little bit about candidates through that. But here locally, we are partnering, the Chamber is partnering with the Greater Wilmington Business Journal, BASE, the Wilmington Cape Fear Home Builders Association, and the Cape Fear Realtor Association to provide some opportunities for you to learn about the candidates directly from themselves. Stay tuned. We've got some details to announce in the very near future about those opportunities. And then if you want to celebrate, towards the end of October, we will have our second annual 40 Under 40 event in partnership with the Star News. 40 young professionals in this community doing amazing things professionally, civically, in their churches. It's just so amazing to read the nominations, and it's very hard to narrow the list down to 40. So we encourage you to join us for an online event celebrating them later this month. Also, stay tuned for other opportunities from the Chamber for ways you can continue to learn and develop yourself. As we can't gather in large crowds, at least for the foreseeable future, we still want to gather to continue to develop ourselves and to be better contributors in our economy. I want to remind you that you can find the full report on the websites of Cape Fear Collective and the Wilmington Chamber. And I'd like to just very sincere, huge shout out and thank you to Cape Fear Collective, the team there, Patrick Bryan, for his commitment through investments of companies in our region to create this collaborative effort on many issues, but certainly specifically on workforce development and talent development for the employers in our region. And then very, very special thanks to Megan Lewis for helping to champion all of this work to make sure that we could get this survey that she wanted to bring to us years ago. And we're so excited that we were finally able to do that. Megan, I greatly appreciate all that you do.
Absolutely. Happy to, and it feels like a big milestone to have the data presented today, and look forward to continued conversations. Reach out to myself or Natalie if we can help facilitate a presentation of this data in your organization or with a group of employers. As Bo said, it's not going to sit on a shelf. We're ready to get to work.
Yeah, and to that end, it's not going to sit on a shelf. We are going to be launching collaboratives, and those collaboratives require that you sit at the table if you're an employer who has that need, that particular need. And so stay tuned. We will be reaching out to invite you to participate in a particular collaborative, and we're going to need your help. So thank you for joining us today. I hope you all have a great rest of the week, and happy September.
Mm-hmm.